Alright, now these are the tools that we're going to use for this drawing. I like to use a range of pencils, and we're going to be going from an HB through a 2B, a 4B and a 6B pencil. Now if you don't know, the H stands for hard and the B stands for black, and so it's about how hard the lead is inside the pencil. So the higher the B number, the softer the lead, which means that it allows more of the graphite to come off on your drawing, and makes it softer, easier for blending and smudging. So really we're going to be using the HB and the 2B for our sketching and our details, and the 4B and the 6B are going to be mainly for the use of tone. Now I like to use a craft knife when I'm sharpening my pencils, and the reason is that you can control how sharp or how blunt you want the pencil to be. With the B pencils, the 4 and the 6B, you actually want quite a blunt, large end on it, and with the HB and the 2B you want to have a sharper point. So the craft knife allows you to just have more control over the pencil. And then of course we need an eraser, and the paper that I'm using is called farjana paper. It's a 285 gram just cartridge paper with a nice very slight texture. You can use any paper that you like really, but you do want something that's a little bit thicker and something that holds the pencil really well. So with our tools, let's get started on the drawing. To make this pencil drawing, we're going to start off by just lightly sketching out the eye, and the first thing that you want to think about doing is just getting in the basic shape of the eye here. We want to make sure that we get that top line looking nice and kind of angled, and then just bring in the bottom line to get the shape. It doesn't matter if you have to do a few sketchy lines to sort of work this out, but this is quite an important stage in the drawing. Now a lot of people, when they start sketching an eye, they think that it's kind of an almond shape, or it might be like an oval, but actually there's some quite kind of different lines that it's important to just understand. So you need to have a really good photograph that you can work from, that you can kind of work out the angles of. Now with the round part of the eye, it's really important to realize that you very rarely see the whole colored area. The only time you'll see that is if you've got a person who is really surprised. So usually it intersects definitely with the top eyelid, but often with the bottom eyelid as well, as it is in this picture. And what I'm doing here is I'm just checking to make sure that the iris in the middle is actually in the middle of that larger circle. So just using the pencil as a bit of a measuring device. So here we are. We've now basically got the basic sketch of the eye in, and we can start laying down some tone now to make it look more 3D. Okay, now as we start adding the tone to the eye, we just want to think about the different shapes that there are in the eye. Now with the eyelid, it's important to think about it as a rounded shape, like a cylinder really. So like a cylinder, it's going to have kind of a lighter area in the middle, and it's going to have darker tones on the top and the bottom as it kind of rounds off towards the face. So what we're wanting to do now is just lay down a very basic base of tone, and I'm just using a 2B pencil for this, just to get a little bit of tone, and you can actually see quite a lot of the texture that is coming through from the paper that I'm using here. So once we've got a really simple base of tone, we can start to kind of think about where to build up the darker areas. So you can see now I'm just working around the coloured part of the eye, and just starting to kind of add in some more of those shadows, those darker shadows that look good. Now I'm just using my finger here to smudge. You can use a smudging tool if you like, but I just find that using my finger is quite easy to do. And we're just wanting to just kind of get a really faint kind of basic tone in here. And it's really about leaving the areas that are really white with no tone or smudging on them at all. So we're talking about the white areas of the eye. With the middle part, the black area of the eye, we're going to be doing that nice and dark soon. But this is just a good base of tone for the more detailed tone that's going to happen later on. One of the things that makes the eye look really effective at the end and quite realistic is when you have a bright white highlight. Now the reason we get these bright highlights is that the eye is a glassy surface, so it's a wet surface, and so that reflects the light, whereas the rest of the skin tone around it kind of absorbs the light a bit more, and we don't get those sharp reflections. So it's important at this stage, before we put too much tone on, just to really define where the reflections are going to be. So just looking at drawing a bit of an edge around them, you'll see as we work through that it won't so much be a line around it, it will just be tone up to the white. And we're also wanting to try and get the white highlight to go over top of the pupil part of the eye, which is the black part, because that will create a really nice contrast. So contrast is when you have black and white beside each other. That creates a high contrast, and that's where your eye will be drawn when you look at the picture. So now I'm just working on some of the details of the iris, which is the coloured part of the eye. And what I'm trying to do here is, if you've ever seen a really close-up photograph of an eye, you'll see that there's a whole lot of kind of little fine lines or details, and I'm just kind of laying down some details in there to try and have a base there for when I tone over top of it. And obviously I have my photograph of the eye right in front of me, so I'm just constantly referring back to that and trying to copy as much information from the photo as I can. And that's really why it is so important to have a good resolution photograph. So you want one that is really clear, in focus, that's large enough that you can zoom in and see the different parts of the eye that you want to see. Now in my photograph, the iris has a darker area around it, so you can see that I've just started to just kind of add in some of those darker tones. Alright, so now that we're ready to start adding the dark tone to the pupil, the key to this really is just about having enough darkness in your pencil to fill the space. Now you can use a 4B or a 6, even a 6B, but I like the sharp edge that you get with the 2B pencil, so that's what I'm using here. And it's just really about just filling in the space, trying to get a nice sharp edge, so a nice sharp contrast around the edges. And you can see already that the little areas that we've left white, they are showing a nice contrast as they're kind of moving into the pupil. Now the pupil is actually a hole through the iris. So the pupil isn't solid, it's actually a hole through where the light comes through. And so there are little kind of cracks or sharp edges which I've started to kind of add in around the sides. And yeah, it's important to kind of try and make it look organic. You don't want it to be a perfect circle. It just wants to, wants to be a dark black area in the middle. Okay, so now that we've finished the iris and the pupil, we're going to start adding some more contrast and some more dark tones to the eyelids. Because at the moment they're very faint, quite low contrast, and so they don't really kind of set off the eye or show off the detail and the tone of the eye how we want it to. So that's one of the things that you can do with a pencil drawing, is don't feel like you have to have every layer be the final layer. Pencil's great that you can just keep working over it, and so you can actually add some tone and then just sit back and think about it and think, do I really need to add more here? And just keep building it up over time. So again, I'm sort of smoothing out and blending as I go, and just using the rubber because I want to try and create a nice bit of contrast with the area above the eyelid. So you can see that as I add the tone, it's starting to make the eye look more 3D, which is pretty important to do. Now what I'm starting to do is I'm just looking at the white area of the eye, and it's not flat, it's actually three-dimensional as well. And so I'm starting to just kind of add in some little areas of tone, add in some little smudges and details. I like to think of it as, at the start I'm kind of looking at the big picture, and then as I move more into the detail side of things, I'm starting to really look at the tiny little details. I'm zooming right in on the picture, and I'm trying to get a sense of, how does this bit work? How does this connect with this? And then trying to copy it as exactly as I can. So I'm just drawing in some of the little veins and the little bits of tone that happen around the white part of the eye. And yeah, just sitting back and just thinking, thinking about what I'm seeing. Now, if you notice, I've just actually cut down the eraser because I needed to get a nice sharp edge on it. Because it was a bit too fat for what I was trying to do. So just cutting it in half gives you a lot of sharp edges. And don't be afraid to sharpen the pencil as well while you're working. Just keep it working. Sometimes you need a nice kind of rounded fat tip, and sometimes you need a really sharp tip. So you just want to kind of figure out what's best for what you're doing. Alright, this is starting to come together. Next we're going to have a think about the eyelashes and start working in those final details to finish the eye. Alright, now for the final stage of this drawing, we need a really sharp pencil. So I like to use a craft knife when I'm sharpening my pencil, and just getting a really nice, beautiful fine tip, and that's going to help us just with some of the details in the eyelashes, for example. Now, with the eyelashes, one of the common mistakes is that people think the eyelashes come from either the inside of the eye or the top of the eyelid. But what happens is, and if you look at a photograph really clearly, they actually grow out of the eyelid, the inner eyelid. So what I do is I start at the point where they grow from, and I just do little flicks that come out from that point. And eyelashes, there are kind of few enough of them that you can just do each little flick individually. Now what I generally like to do is think about the eyelashes as kind of growing away from the center of the eye. So the eyelashes on the left are going to be curving away from the eye, and the eyelashes on the right are going to be curving away from the eye that way. The other thing to note is, and you'll see this on the photograph, is that the eyelashes are fattest at the top on the outside of the eye. So you'll see me sort of building up more layers, but I'm still drawing them individually, and you'll just see I just overlap them more and more as they come for that area. And again, as we come along the bottom of the eye, you can see the eyelashes are kind of leaning out or leaning in, or they're leaning out from the center of the eye. And there aren't many lashes on the bottom on the inside of the eye. You can see why it's important to have a nice sharp pencil, because you want these sharp lash lines to be really nice and sharp and dark